This is a combat search and rescue, CSAR, system breakdown. In a recent F-15E strike aircraft incident, both crew members were forced into a high-speed ejection over a high-density threat environment, triggering a full CSAR response, combat search and rescue operation. The pilot was recovered, but the weapons system officer, he remained isolated on the ground. For nearly 48 hours, that isolation window stretched far beyond standard recovery timelines, meaning this wasn't a quick pickup. It became a prolonged survival phase inside a hostile search environment, where ground search teams, signal interception systems, and aerial surveillance were all competing to find him first. In simple terms, this wasn't just about staying alive. It was about not being found long enough for the system to reach him. To understand how he survived, we have to analyze the multi-domain recovery architecture, the invisible machine of satellites, sensors, and elite specialists that activates the moment a seat leaves the rails. Kinetic survival, the physics of ejection. When the airframe becomes non-survivable, the kinetic survival system takes over. This isn't a simple escape. It's a sequenced pyrotechnic chain designed to save a life in a situation that physics says should be fatal. In a two-seater like the F-15E, the system uses kinetic separation logic. The weapon systems officer in the back seat always ejects first. This is critical. If the pilot in the front seat went first, his rocket motor exhaust would critically compromise the rear crew member due to rocket exhaust exposure. This sequence happens in milliseconds. First, explosive charges jettison the canopy. Then, the primary rocket motor ignites, launching the seat clear of the jet. At 500 knots, the air behaves like a solid wall. This is supersonic ejection physics. The human body takes extreme aerodynamic loads that can shatter bones. To keep the pilot from a lethal high-speed tumble, the seat deploys a drogue chute to stabilize the descent. The signal grid: triangulation versus survival. Once the crew hits the ground, the mission resets. They are no longer pilots. They are isolated survival nodes inside a live detection grid. They usually face geographic dispersion. Even if they eject together, wind drift and parachute timing can separate them by miles. To signal for help, the survivor uses a triple redundant beacon architecture. Signaling capability is built into the jet's black box, the ejection seat, and the pilot's personal CSEL, Combat Survivor Evader Locator radio. These devices use encrypted burst transmissions. These are whispered data bursts sent in milliseconds to reduce the probability of intercept. But every signal carries risk. Adversarial SIGINT, Signals Intelligence Units, are always listening. They use SIGINT triangulation to find a pilot's location by measuring where the signal came from. They don't need to decode the message, they just need to see the spike on the spectrum from two different locations to calculate a GPS coordinate. This creates a high-stakes trade-off. Transmit too often and you invite intercept. Transmit too little and your own team can't find you. Every transmission must be timed. Every movement must be calculated. To counter this, survival doctrine shifts. Instead of constant signaling, the survivor becomes a low observable human target, moving between terrain features, limiting exposure, and only transmitting when recovery assets are confirmed to be within range. Think of it like this: he's not calling for help. He's waiting for the exact moment when calling for help won't get him caught. SERE, the human system. On the ground, the pilot's most important weapon system is SERE Level C training: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The first rule is simple: abandon the incident site immediately. The parachute and the ejection seat are high-contrast visual markers that search teams will head toward first. The pilot must become a passive node, utilizing cover and concealment to hide from visual and thermal sensors. In some cases, they carry a blood chit, a piece of fabric with an American flag and a message in local languages, promising a life-changing financial reward for assistance. It's a low-tech way to counteract any bounties offered by the threat system. When the rescue team finally arrives, they use authentication protocols. These are non-electronic challenge and response codes. In a contested environment, the rescue team assumes every radio signal could be a trap, designed to lure them into an ambush. Authentication ensures the person on the ground is the actual airman. In extended scenarios, SERE is no longer just about hiding. It becomes a long-duration evasion system. That means managing fatigue, exposure, and terrain. Survivors may move to elevated ground for visibility and signal advantage, but that also increases their exposure to aerial detection. So every decision becomes a trade-off. better communication or better concealment, higher ground or deeper cover. And over time, those decisions determine whether the recovery system succeeds or arrives too late. The CSAR architecture, the layered cake. A CSAR mission is a massive, multi-domain integrated system. It's organized like a layered cake of protection. The space layer. Satellites track emergency beacons and monitor threat ground movement with high-res imagery. The top cover layer. Stealth fighters like the F-35E orbit at high altitude to provide wide-area situational awareness, ensuring no interfering aerial threats within the operational environment interfere with the recovery zone. Between space-based detection and ground recovery, another layer often activates. Persistent ISR platforms, such as remotely piloted aircraft. These systems don't just observe. They create a protective surveillance envelope, tracking movement patterns, identifying approaching threats, and maintaining continuous awareness of the survivor's environment. In system terms, they reduce uncertainty in the most chaotic phase of the mission. The command layer. The MC-130J Commando 2 serves as the command and control node. It is the brain of the mission, managing data links and communication. Its most critical role is aerial refueling range extension, allowing helicopters to loiter in the search area for up to 10 hours. In extended recovery operations, this layer expands into forward-deployed infrastructure. Temporary landing zones, known as Forward Arming and Refueling Points, FARPs, may be established closer to the survivor to compress response time. But this introduces a new layer of risk. These sites operate on unstable terrain, limited logistics, and high detection exposure, which means the system is no longer just rescuing a pilot. It is now sustaining an entire recovery architecture deep inside a contested environment. And if those forward assets fail, the system must rapidly adapt, reroute, and continue the mission under degraded conditions. The fire suppression layer. Usually a flight of A-10 Warthogs executing Sandy mission protocols. The Sandy pilot acts as the on-scene commander, establishing a kinetic suppression buffer between the threat system and the survivor. The extraction layer. The HH-60W Jolly Green 2 utilizes low-altitude penetration profiles, flying nape of the Earth to use terrain as a shield. They use thermal signature masking on their exhausts to hide from manpads. By this stage, the operation has already been running for hours, sometimes days, which means the extraction phase is happening under accumulated pressure. Assets are low on time, exposure risk is higher, and the margin for error is almost zero. So when the helicopters finally move in, they're not just executing a rescue, they're closing a narrow window that may not open again. The final physical link is the Pararescue Jumper, PJ. These are Tier 1 operators who are also advanced combat medical specialists. They can deliver pararescue tactical medicine, advanced trauma care, right there in a high-threat engagement environment. Every satellite and stealth jet in the sky exists for the few minutes it takes to put a PJ on the ground and get the survivor on a hoist. In modern engineering, losing a jet is just a hardware loss, but losing the pilot is a systemic failure. The US military spends millions because the most important system isn't the aircraft, it's the person who flies it. The CSAR system is the ultimate guarantee that no matter the detection environment, the machine will reach across domains, from space to the ground, to bring you home. It accounts for the physics of supersonic ejection, the limits of stealth, and the dangers of the electromagnetic spectrum. The mission doesn't end when the jet disappears, it just enters its most critical phase. And in this architecture, failure is not an option.